Much, Curtis, and thanks to Wendy as well, and everybody at the Veterans Affairs Small Business Office. Again, Jennifer Schaus here. I'm really excited to be with you guys. It looks like we've got about an hour, and I've got quite a few slides to get through, so I'm going to march forward here. As Curtis mentioned, we are based in downtown DC and provide some of the services that you see here on your screen. More information is listed on our website. As Curtis also mentioned, we've got quite a few complimentary webinars. There's no cost to you on our YouTube channel, 30 of which, or 30 or more, focused on GSA schedules. The link to our channel is listed there. Here's some other webinars that we've done, some of the topics that we've covered over the years. Again, all are complimentary, and we've covered every department, so all of the 15 federal departments, as well as some of the various agencies webinars on doing business with. FAR, DFARS, FAR supplements, subcontracting, and this year we're covering the top 40 federal contractors. Those are every Wednesday at 12 o'clock. Okay, now let's get into why we are all here today, which is to talk about GSA schedules. Here's the agenda, just a couple topics that I'm going to go through, and we'll finish out with conclusions. I think Wendy and Curtis will keep an eye on the questions that come in, and we'll take a break every so often to go through those. Okay, so as far as an overview, who is GSA? Let's talk about who we're dealing with here. This is General Services Administration. They're a non-appropriated agency, meaning that they do not receive any taxpayer funding. They are self-funded. So GSA oversees PBS, which stands for the Public Building Service. So they are we'll say the federal real estate agent. And then they also oversee the GSA schedules, which are these contracts for products, services, software, any type of solution that the federal government might need. They also oversee and manage all of the public websites, so sam.gov, FPDS, USA Spending. Anything that ends in .gov is pretty much managed by GSA. So that's who they are. And let's move on here. So we'll talk about some of the fundamentals of the schedule. And this is, I believe, in total a 3-part series. I'm covering part 1 and part 2. Part 2 is next week, and the week after I think is part 3. But let's just dig in here. So what is a schedule? It's more or less, I'll call it a vendor shortlist. So I always, when I'm talking to people outside of government, whether it's family or friends, I say it's similar to being listed on Amazon, but it's specific to products and services that the government buys, the federal government. It's absolutely not required to sell to the government. It is only a way to market your business. And it doesn't mean that you absolutely need to use this to market your business. There are other ways that you can do that. It's also one of many contract vehicles out there, and I'm going to give you a list of some others that exist. But GSA does a great job of marketing themselves. So oftentimes companies feel that they might need a schedule. Because GSA does a great job of marketing itself, it can work to your advantage. Once you're on the schedule and you've got a list of pipeline opportunities that are specific to GSA schedule for you and your client. But it also can work against you because many people then think that they need to be on the schedule when in fact it's just an option. It's not used that often, roughly about 10 to 15% of the time in federal purchases. And I'm going to show you a pie chart later in the presentation that goes through that. It still represents billions with a B, billions of dollars in federal procurement and spending. But again, it is not required. That's the biggest takeaway. It's a marketing tool only, and you do not need it. It's basically just allowing your business to be a smaller subset of larger opportunities. So instead of everybody seeing opportunities on sam.gov, GSA has their own portal where only the GSA schedule holders can see those opportunities. In order to get listed with GSA, you have to be vetted upfront, and it's primarily focused on the work that you've done in the past as well as price. Price is really 99% of the game here. Okay, so as I mentioned, it's really just a smaller subset of eyes looking at opportunities. So it then minimizes your competition, not completely eliminates it, but just it's a more focused group of companies that are going to be competing for the same opportunities. Okay. And some of the additional things that you should know about GSA schedule: when you are awarded the schedule, the clock starts ticking and you've got a 5-year contract. Beyond that, you need to ensure that you're meeting all the terms and conditions because this is a contract. And if you do meet those terms and conditions, we'll talk about what they are in a moment, you can then be renewed for an additional 5 years, and that will happen 3 times. So in essence, it's a 20-year contract, 5 years initially, and then 3 5-year renewal periods. Okay, there's roughly about 18 to 20,000 companies that hold the GSA schedule. So they've got that GSA schedule number next to their business, but more than half of them are not meeting the sales requirement, which is to bring in at least $25,000 worth of business through your schedule. Now, you may be on the schedule and have $100 million worth of contracts with, let's just say, the Air Force or EPA or DOD or whoever it is. But if that money is not flowing through your schedule, GSA doesn't care. You're not meeting the sales quota. So keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier, GSA is not appropriated. They are self-funded through the schedule holder. So you're more or less paying GSA a fee each quarter of 0.75% of your schedule sales. If you're not bringing in any money through your schedule, you're costing them money because they still have to maintain your schedule, and that's an administrative cost that they don't want to incur. So back to this 25-year sales or $25,000 per year sales quota. The first year that you're on the schedule is a grace period, but then after that, you better be running hard with bringing in hopefully a lot more than the 25K. The schedule, as I mentioned, is based on your lowest price, and I'll probably repeat that about 10 more times just to make the point. The price restrictions are important to be cognizant of because once you're on the schedule, you cannot offer anyone through GSA a rate that is higher than your GSA rate. So your rates are really a price ceiling or a not to exceed rate. So as you bid for work through your schedule, you're typically going to be offering rates that are lower than your GSA rate. To get onto the schedule, it's just like any other solicitation. You just hop over to sam.gov and download the solicitation and complete the forms that they're requiring. What has happened over the years is there were multiple schedules that existed under GSA, or I'll call them sub-schedules, based on what your company was offering or doing. And then there were a group of special item numbers underneath that, and I'll talk about these special item numbers in a moment. But currently, the way GSA is organized, there is just one multiple award schedule. Multiple award meaning that there's multiple companies that have been awarded the schedule. Now let's talk about how that is organized. So the differentiators under the GSA schedule are what is called special item numbers, commonly referred to as SINs. Most of the SINs are going to correspond to your NAICS code, your industry codes. And there's about 323 SINs total. Each of these SINs is going to be categorized and it'll have a description. So if you're deciding to get onto the schedule, you first need to identify what SIN or SINs your company would fall under. Basically, you would look at the services that you provide and match them up to the SIN numbers. Each SIN is going to have its own requirements, but more or less the requirements have really been scaled back over the years. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe not. I have various opinions on that. But some of the IT-focused SINs are going to have additional requirements. So again, this is why you want to download the solicitation and read it to make sure that you meet and or exceed those requirements. So everything didn't fit on one slide here. So this is just a snapshot of the 323 SINs. The category is going to be kind of the large category, and then there's a smaller category. You see the third column over there is the SIN number. Some of them correspond exactly to a NAICS code, others do not. So keep in mind that your SIN is specific to your GSA offering. And then here is the second half of that graph. So it gives you the SIN title and the SIN description. And by reading the SIN description, you can further understand if your company meets, not really meets, but where your company would be categorized. If you want the link to this spreadsheet, it's right here. So the slides will be available. We always post all of our slides on slideshare.net. It's a free site. You can log in with your LinkedIn credentials, and I believe somebody from my team has perhaps uploaded those for us. Okay, so the GSA schedule, it can be used across all of the federal government, so every federal government department and agency, also quasi-government. So when we think about the Red Cross, the World Bank, the IMF, the IFC, these sort of kind of quasi the United Nations, they have the ability, and I'll underscore ability, to purchase off of the GSA schedule. It may be an educational process for you and your client if in fact you are selling to any of these organizations. The SLED market, state, local, and education, that includes universities. They also have the ability, and it's kind of going to be on a case-by-case basis. We get a little bit too far into the weeds if I went into the TMAS and CMAS. TMAS is Texas multiple award schedule. CMAS is California multiple award schedule. They more or less, and I'll put more or less in quotation marks, will grandfather in your GSA schedule offering. There's still some paperwork that needs to be completed, but in the event that you're selling to the state and local market and you already have a GSA schedule, this can be helpful to expand your footprint. The whole purpose of the schedule, so, why does it exist? It makes it easier for the government to purchase from you. So, because they know that the competition has taken place up front versus most solicitations that you see on sam.gov. You're going to have multiple companies, multiple vendors sending in proposals. What happens here is your prices have been vetted up front. They're reviewing your past performance, and that way the government knows that they can buy directly from you. Okay. So what is your benefit? Because they're going to squeeze you, GSA is going to squeeze you on price. You've got to go through this whole vetting process that takes time. Again, if we think back to the slide that had the picture of the kid with the eyeballs, it's basically smaller set of people looking at the same opportunity. So some of the competition is eliminated. It's going to be more fierce and more focused competition because all of these companies, just like your business, has been vetted and are seeing just these GSA schedule opportunities. It does give the government some confidence. The government's risk averse, so they're going to see you as a credible business because you have been vetted. As I mentioned earlier, GSA does a great job of marketing itself. So you kind of have that flagship name, GSA logo next to your business. Hopefully you've got it on your back of your business card, on your website, and your auto signature, and on your capability statement and everything else, just to show that you are, in fact, we'll say, vetted by GSA. You will get these dedicated requests for proposals that are only viewed and visible by the other GSA schedule holders. So again, a smaller subset of competition, but more fierce competition. Okay, I'll take a quick break, and I don't know, Wendy, if there's any questions that came in before we get into the actual process. And I'm trying to go in a fast manner just so we can cover all the content and save room for questions.
Okay, yes, we do have a few questions. I want to remind everyone, please place your questions in the Q&A. If you are on a mobile device, to access the Q&A section, you will have to click on, I believe it's 3 dots at the top. And when you click on those 3 dots, there are 2 tabs. One of them says Advanced. Select Advanced and then scroll down to the bottom, and it should say Q&A for those individuals that are on a mobile device. So for our first question, it's first starts off with the statement and the question at the end. I have a question. It seems to be extremely difficult for my firm, Jeffrey Austin LLC, to develop a GSA schedule pricing scheme when each photo assignment is unique. We are architecture, construction, and infrastructure photographers. When doing construction photographic documentation, our work falls under the section 013200 of the construction documentation as laid out by generally the contracting officer, but sometimes the program manager. Jeffrey, I think, oh, there it is. How could I develop a GSA schedule for my firm? So that's what the question is.
Sure, and thanks for the question. I'm not sure I understand exactly what the obstacle is, perhaps identifying a special item number. I would, if I always suggest going back to understanding who within your customer base is asking you to be on the schedule, and if there are opportunities that they are going to publish specifically for your company, then I ask them what special item number they're going to be putting these under, because you may have two contracting officers, could be from the exact same department, even the exact same agency, that view a procurement under two different special item numbers. So I would say go back to the source. I'm assuming I'm understanding this question accurately. If not, feel free to shoot us an email at the email address listed there on the screen.
Thank you. The next question, could you repeat the percentage that the vendor pays to GSA?
Sure, it's 0.75%. That's the industrial funding fee. It's less than 1%, but it's still going to amount to something, and that fee is more or less a wash, meaning that it gets built into your pricing. We'll cover more of that next week when we get a little bit more into the weeds here.
Thank you. Once you've established price for services with GSA, can those prices be renegotiated over time?
Yep, your pricing will take a variety of formats, assuming that we're talking about professional services. Your pricing is either going to be set for a 12-month period. That's typically if your internal policies are based on a commercial price list, a CPL, again, commercial price list, or if you have market rates, then typically your rates will be set for a 5-year period. And sometimes that's based on Department of Labor, Table 5. And again, we'll get into more of the details on pricing next week. This is just more of a high-level overview. So in the event that your prices on your GSA schedule are set for 12 months, at the end of 12 months, you can submit a modification to GSA to indicate that your commercial prices went up by, X%, and therefore you want to raise your GSA prices by, probably X minus something percent. In the other scenario, your prices are built out for a 5-year period. Both have pros and cons. I have specific feelings on both of those, and then there's really not a cookie cutter answer there. But we'll get into more details next Thursday on pricing.
Thank you. Do the GSA schedules for IT include services or just hardware, software, commodities?
So there are 323 special item numbers under the GSA schedule, and so there are going to be a variety of special item numbers for IT products, IT services, software, office products, everything under the sun. So you would need to look at the special item numbers. There was the link in one of the earlier slides that would take you to that spreadsheet with the special item numbers.
And then our last question, would this be a good vehicle for consultants? Not sure if the government buys these type of services this way.
Sure, thanks for the question. So the real answer is, how does your customer prefer to purchase? So don't put the cart before the horse. Build it and they will come is not a strategy. As I mentioned earlier, 60%, so more than half of the companies on the schedule, have 0 sales under their schedule. That is not good, because GSA will cancel or revoke your contract because you have not met the sales quota. So do your homework first by conducting market research on all of the available websites that are out there. Download the spreadsheets to find out, is the government purchasing your product, service, or software? If so, how much? Where do they purchase? How do they purchase? When did they purchase? What is the dollar amount that's going through the schedule versus what's the dollar amount that's going through full and open competition? What's going set aside? All of this data exists out there. It's just a matter of a couple clicks. and downloading some spreadsheets through your sam.gov and USA Spending and FPDS website. So I'm sure that the OSDBU office has some webinars on those topics on conducting market research, which is really 10 steps before you get to considering the GSA schedule.
Thank you, Jennifer, and I'm going to pass it back to you. We can address some additional questions later on throughout the presentation.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Wendy. Appreciate that. Okay. So now we'll talk about the process. As I mentioned here, especially in the last question, is you absolutely need to do your homework. So, and by homework, we mean market research. So using sam.gov, using FPDS, using USA Spending, or perhaps you're purchasing a one of the data aggregators out there that has a monthly subscription service that with a easier to use platform where you can easily download data to find out what exactly is going through the GSA schedule versus what is not. So you should have these answers. Who is your customer? And specifically, not just Department of Education or Department of Defense. It should be very, very specific. And how are they purchasing? And what are the other contract vehicles that they are using? So you should have finite numbers to determine if this is in your best interest or not. This slide I like just because, and the numbers are rough estimates. They're not exact and they're going to vary for your specific product or service. So for someone that's providing janitorial services versus somebody providing landscaping versus someone that's, you know, IT professional services, these numbers are going to change and you should have these specific numbers for your company. Again, you can get that all through research on sam.gov, USA Spending, and FPDS. So full and open competition, that's going to be everything that you see on sam.gov that anybody with an internet connection can pursue. Department and agency vehicles, this is going to be the contract vehicles that are specific to departments or agencies. So NASA has a contract vehicle called SEWP. It's SEWP. It's an acronym. DHS has one called Eagle. Navy has one called Seaport E, and the list go on and on. Each department and some agencies have their own vehicles. So again, make sure that you know if you're speaking to the right people, then you will know about these vehicles because your customer will tell you this is how we are purchasing your service. GSA schedule, like I said, roughly 10 to 15% of the time. Set asides, these are going to be the small women-owned, veteran-owned, hub zone, all the other check boxes out there. Simplified acquisition, those are set aside for small businesses. Sole source is, I wouldn't suggest going this route because it's highly unlikely that you have something that nobody else on the planet has. OTAs, that number is probably a little bit higher than 2%. They started really seeing more traction during, we'll say during the COVID contracting period. And then other will just be other mechanisms that the government is purchasing by that are too many to list. So, the benefit of the GSA schedule is it can be used across the entire federal government. So whether it's DOD, Department of Ag, GSA itself, NASA, National Science Foundation, whoever it is, can purchase from the GSA schedule. So some of the other vehicles that I mentioned here, DHS Eagle and so forth. So again, make sure you know who is your customer and how do they purchase. And again, that can be done through the research on the various websites that I've mentioned many times already. Some of these contract vehicles do have functional groups. They're not going to have special item numbers. They may have, you know, an IT category, an IT small business category, et cetera, but they're each going to have, each of these contract vehicles will have their own nuances. It's up to you to understand and download the solicitation to find out if you meet those requirements or not. Again, I cannot reiterate enough how much doing your homework and kind of reverse engineering into this process is. Do not just get the schedule because your neighbor has it or a competitor has it. Do the homework to find out if the specific group of people that you're talking to within the agency prefers to purchase via this contract vehicle. So you also want to understand how your prices compare, because pricing is the most important component of the schedule. If you're selling products, you can do some market research on gsaadvantage.gov. If you're selling services, you can hop over to buygsa.gov. And I think I have some screenshots here. So what we picked here was job title project managers, simply because it's fairly common. This is a screenshot from buyusa.gov. I'm sorry, bygsa.gov. We selected that the project manager has a bachelor's degree and 5 years of experience. The average rate comes in at $140. Now, if you are considering the schedule, because that's how your customer tells you, that's how they purchase, and your project manager with 5 years of experience and a bachelor's degree typically goes for $200 an hour, the GSA may not be the right tool for you, because GSA will negotiate you down to the $140 rate unless you've got some extenuating circumstance that your project manager, I don't know, has some sort of certification or something additional that would warrant a higher price. But 99.999% of the time, they're going to negotiate you down to the rate that the other schedule holders that have the same job title with the same education and same experience have. So do your homework before you decide to get onto the schedule, because it would really be a waste of your time and effort to go down this path only to find out that, you know, once you get a couple months into this process and you're on the line with GSA negotiating prices, that they are pushing you down to a rate that is going to put you out of business. Here's just some additional details of what that actual screenshot looks like. So again, homework, can't reiterate it enough. And just because you meet or exceed the GSA schedule requirements doesn't mean that it's a good idea for your company to pursue. What if your customer prefers to purchase off of the State Department contract vehicle or the DHS vehicle? Again, do your homework to find out that this is in fact going to pay rewards for your business. At the next point, then you want to, if you have in fact, you know, gotten the green light, everything makes sense, you've got, you know, 4 or 5 customers in your pipeline that all prefer to purchase off of GSA, then you want to map out kind of your timeline, your compliance matrix. A lot of companies that are pursuing the schedule are small businesses, so they're putting the proposal paperwork together in the evenings, on the weekends, you know, maybe a weekly conference call with a consulting firm like us, something along those lines. So map out your timeline is important. A compliance matrix to make sure that you are going to, again, meet or exceed the requirements. Quality control, perhaps that's somebody to come in with fresh eyes to look at what you've prepared. And then you'll need to manage the submission. And then there's always going to be a cost of doing business. So post-award, there is reporting and work that needs to be done, kind of internal contract management, contract administration. Now I'll take another pause here before we get into the proposal components.
Thank you, Jennifer. Our first question, can we get on a GSA schedule with a new service offering that we haven't offered previously? For example, we would like to begin offering cybersecurity penetration testing, but this is a new service offering for us and we don't have a price history established.
Sure, great question. Really wanted to save pricing for next week, but I'll go ahead and answer the question, and thank you for it. So GSA will require that you submit a copy of an invoice to show that you have sold something that you're proposing to them. In lieu of invoices, if you have a proposal that you sent to, whether the proposal was accepted or not, whether you won the work or not, and it doesn't need to be a government proposal, it could be a proposal to McDonald's, Coca-Cola, ABC Company, Little Sisters of the Poor, whoever it is. So if you have a proposal, that can be used in lieu of that. If not, then typically they will ask for 3 competitors on the schedule and to show that your pricing is aligned with theirs. I always err on the side of caution and ensure that our clients who are pursuing the schedule have multiple invoices. If this is something new, then you're going to have more scrutiny to add that to your schedule. And then once you're on, you're still going to need to write proposals. So when you see these RFPs come out on GSA eBuy that are looking for cybersecurity services, you're not going to have any past performance because you've never sold it before, even though it's on your schedule. So when you go to write that component of the proposal, you're probably not going to win the work. So that's my argument for do the work first, generate some invoices, show that you guys have done this before taking a higher risk. Now, there's always exceptions. If you've got a customer, of course, that says, hey, once you're on, we're going to buy specifically from you and we're going to buy X% or X amount of dollars, then yeah, it would be, it can be, worth your while.
Thank you. The next question is, if you've been on the GSA schedule before, but have let everything expire, should you start a new contract or try to renew the old one?
So if your schedule has lapsed and let's say it depends on kind of why it ended. If you haven't met sales requirement, then you'll need to close out your contract. If it still has a heartbeat, and there were some exceptions that were made during COVID just because purchasing was down of certain items, obviously, were down during COVID. So I would reach back to your contracting officer and find out the best course forward. But I would be very cautious and only renew that if you've got a pipeline of opportunities where you've got clients or potential clients, hot prospects, hot or warm prospects that will purchase from you once you're on the schedule.
Next question, what if you have a partner company that manufactures products that no one else does in a manner consistent with the government salient characteristics, partner company is a foreign-owned small business, USMCA.
Okay, it sounds like maybe you're reselling products or a distributor, you would need to have a letter of supply from the manufacturer. The manufacturer also needs to ensure that they are TAA compliant, Trade Agreement Act compliant. And that list is ever changing depending upon, foreign policy and that sort of thing. So you would need to ensure that they meet those requirements. And then you can potentially be a dealer / reseller of those items if in fact all of those checkboxes are met.
Thank you. So the last question, and then I'm gonna turn it back over to you, Jennifer. What kind of business standards or audits? No, I'm sorry, I'm gonna skip this question. If you elect to go to GSA route while establishing a company and credibility and you decide to expand and increase price, can you elect to allow your GSA status to elapse? And if so, then is it a difficult process or one that carries a stigma?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you either reread it or maybe I can pull it up
Okay.
in the chat?
If you elect to go to the GSA route while establishing a company and credibility, and you decide to expand and increase your pricing, can you elect to allow your GSA status to elapse? And if so, then is it a difficult process or one that carries a stigma?
Uh, the way I'm hearing the question is company is on the schedule and their business is growing and their prices are increasing, but for whatever reason they are choosing to cancel their schedule. Is that a
Yes,
bad
that's
thing?
how I'm reading it. And so
Okay.
they want to cancel it. Will it negatively impact them, I guess, in terms of continuing to work with the federal government? If we're not reading this question correctly, Tim, if you could kind of clarify your question and we can respond to it, but that's how I'm reading it, Jennifer.
Okay. No, anybody can cancel their schedule, and sometimes companies do because they jumped in prematurely. And this is why we have these webinars and focus on encouraging companies to do your homework and really do the research on price. Because if your commercial prices are increasing exponentially and GSA is negotiating really hard with you and not letting you get the margins that you want, the profit margins that you want, then it might put you out of business by staying on the schedule. So nothing wrong with canceling your schedule. Okay, so let's move on. And if that's not the question, then maybe it answers it for somebody else that perhaps had that question. So let's talk about the proposal components and the requirements. We've got about 20 minutes left here. So there's three main sections. the administrative, technical, and the pricing. Obviously, the pricing is going to be the bear here. The administrative section has a couple components to it. They want your last 2 years balance sheet and income statement. Sometimes GSA may contact you and ask for your SF 527. That's a standard form 527. That's a bank reference. It actually goes to your bank. Just be cognizant of that. You don't need to submit it. If you're submitting a proposal, let's say today, then you would have your 2021 and 2022 balance sheet and income statement. And then I would also encourage you to do a year to date for 2023. This is assuming that your financials are on a calendar fiscal year. The readiness assessment and pathway to success are both found on the vendor support center. That's what the VSC stands for there. And I encourage everybody to go there and complete those 2 things if you're just considering the schedule, because that will make you conduct some homework to find out who within your special item number, how many companies have 0 sales next to their name. That will be very eye-opening for everybody. And you'll basically find out that it's like the 80-20 rule, that 80% of the businesses on the schedule are doing 20% of the work. Everybody else is more or less left in the dust with minimal numbers. So take some time to do those, again, regardless if you're getting on the schedule or not, because it will encourage you to ask for, to basically ask yourself some good questions. The administrative section is where you're also going to put your cover letter, your SAM record, and you want to make sure you've got the right NAICS code that maps over to your special item number. GSA will typically come back and ask for your tax ID after you've submitted the proposal. We like to encourage our clients to submit it with the proposal. If you're using an authorized negotiator, you'll need that form submitted. And if you've had a previous schedule, a current schedule, something that's been rejected, or any schedules that have been canceled for whatever reason, you should include the cancellation letter, as well as all of that documentation that goes with previous schedules, rejected, etc. Okay, that's the administrative section. If you're a small business doing this yourself and maybe going after, let's say 1 or 2 special item numbers, that first section can take you about, I don't know, 2 weeks to do if you're doing this kind of on a part-time basis. The technical section is a little bit more meat to it. You're going to have a corporate narrative and a quality control document. These are both GSA forms. Do not just, free form here, or don't just submit your quality control internal document. These each have about 6 or 7, maybe it's 8 questions each. Again, it's found in the solicitation, so you want to make sure you download the solicitation, answer those questions. They will be cut and paste into the GSA form when you go to make your submission. You'll also need either 3 CPARs or references. For anyone that's been around GSA for a while, this has replaced Open Ratings. Open Ratings is a company that was owned by Dun & Bradstreet, which would conduct independent surveys of your customers. There's also a formal questionnaire that gets completed by your customers to basically indicate that they have worked with you in the past, and they will evaluate you on a variety of factors. It's a pretty simple questionnaire. It shouldn't take them more than 5 minutes total, 5 to 7 minutes total to really complete that. These references do not need to be government. It could be nonprofit, it could be churches, it could be state, local, it can be commercial, it can be, again, McDonald's, Burger King, it doesn't matter who. A customer is a customer is a customer. However, if you do have government experience, then I would highly encourage you to use those as your past performance. Each SIN number will have a requirement to have a project narrative, and that's going to be a GSA form, this project narrative. There's about 8 to 10 questions on this that will ask you about the contract that's relevant to the SIN number that you're pursuing. So if your SIN number is 54151S for IT professional services, then your contract that you're going to use as past performance needs to be relevant to IT professional services. You'll need a copy of the contract, specifically the statement of work. You want to make sure it's signed, dated, and has a decent dollar amount tagged with it. That gets submitted here with this proposal. And let's see, and those are also more or less copied and pasted into the GSA portal as you're submitting your proposal. Okay, and these all have timelines on them as well. We'll get into more specifics next week on those. The technical, this is for product companies. So as I mentioned, I think we were talking about a manufacturer who's outside of the US. You'll need a letter of supply if you're not the manufacturer, and you'll also need to ensure that the company is TAA compliant. Ability 1 comes into play here too. So Ability 1 is part of Department of Justice Unicor, and they manufacture some products. If they are manufacturing something, then you'll need to make sure that you are not, in fact, making those same products. Okay, for services, you'll need an HR plan, and you also need a Service Contract Act. I'm going to pause here for any questions.
Hi, Jennifer. We have a few, but I'm answering them in the Q&A. We'll address the rest of them some of them that we have pending at the end. I just want to make sure that you had enough time to get through your presentation.
Okay, sounds good. Great. Okay, so let's move on to pricing, and this is really the where the beef is, and the bulk of what will probably hold most companies up in submitting a proposal to GSA. So when the federal government, whether it's USAID or Ag or Commerce or DoD is purchasing from you, they know that your company has basically jumped through all the hoops that GSA wants you to, that they know that you have past performance in selling these products, services, or software in the past, and that your prices are negotiated upfront with GSA. So that allows them to then buy directly from you. So what your GSA prices I mentioned earlier are more or less a price ceiling or a not to exceed rate. And those are going to be your negotiated rates with GSA. This is why oftentimes the schedule is not in your best interest, because your prices get negotiated down to something that does not make your company profitable. So the actual components of the pricing proposal include, for anyone selling services, will be a labor category matrix. So that's going to be your job titles. If you're selling products, you've got a product listing with your product number and internal codes and that sort of thing, as well as country of manufacture. Your price list here, I talked about this earlier. You either have a commercial price list, a CPL, or you're using market rates, and that will somewhat dictate your GSA rates. Are they going to be set for a 12-month period and negotiated at the end of every 12 months, or are they going to be built out for 5 years based on Department of Labor, Table 5, economic indicators? You'll need your backup documentation, invoice justification, so an invoice to show that you've sold every single job title or every single product. Obviously, the invoices do not need to be government. They can be commercial. An invoice is an invoice is an invoice. In lieu of an invoice, you can use proposals. And again, those proposals do not need to have been won. They can be pending. So keep that in mind, but I always prefer to use an invoice. It just makes the process that much smoother. Next up is the price proposal. This is a GSA form. It's a spreadsheet that you complete with all of your information on the discounts that you want to provide to GSA. It also helps to have a competitive analysis that's more or less just for your internal assistance in order to help you be more strategic with your price proposal. There's also a commercial sales practice, the CSP1, that indicates the amount of revenue you think you're going to be doing through your schedule, and then why you believe that your pricing is fair and reasonable, and that should be more or less pulled from that competitive analysis. So it certainly behooves you to take the time to do that. So again, GSA will want something of rate that is equal to or better than the rates that you've given to your favorite customer, and not favorite customer is not defined as you love their logo because it's really pretty, or they always send you chocolates at Christmas. Your most favorite customer is the customer that you've given discounts to. And we're talking about standard discounts here. So for example, if you always give a 10% discount to nonprofits, then GSA will also want a 10% discount. So they conduct 2 litmus tests when they get your proposal. The first is, who are you giving your internal discounts to, meaning we always give a 10% discount to nonprofits. So therefore, GSA, we're going to give you, let's say, 10.5% or 11%. So they want something that's equal to or better than those internal discounts. And then your external prices, meaning this is the second litmus test. Who are the other companies on the schedule selling the same thing, and making sure that your prices are in sync with those. So again, this is just kind of reiterating what I said here. And you can do that market research on those various websites on the where we looked at the project manager with the average rate of 140. That you definitely need to do before, as a best practice, before you decide to get onto the schedule. And I'll pause here and see if there's anything on any of the proposal components.
There was a question concerning pricing. We are currently on the GSA schedule and had help acquiring it. They did not add labor for us to do so So do we need to wait the 12-month period to add this? Labor is required to install our unified communications platform.
Okay, it sounds like you've got a schedule that has a SIN number, a special item number for products. So you would have to make a modification to then add labor. So you just need to identify the special item number for labor, send in a modification that has those job titles with the justification, meaning the invoices, to show the hourly rates for those job titles, and add that. And you don't need to wait 12 months. The only thing you need to wait 12 months for is excuse me, to increase your prices if your prices are just set for that 12-month period. So if a company gets awarded a schedule today, they can more or less turn around tomorrow, make a modification to add additional SINs, add labor categories. The only thing they can't do is increase their prices. You can decrease your prices, you just can't increase them. That's the 12-month holdup.
The second question, we are a promotional items distributor, and we have 1 million items or more in our catalog that we imprint with agency logos. Will we submit a price list for every single item? Or if we do a select number of items, can products like a different bag be added later on to the contract? Or is it more for the category?
So I would have to look at the special item number for those promotional products. But if there's, a bag that gets a logo on it with the name of the conference or trade show, assuming that's kind of the angle that you guys are selling, then you could probably just list the bag, and then I'm sure there's just a flat fee or some sort of set fee, regardless if the logo says the VA or GSA or OMB or OPM or whoever it is. So you want to make it simple and minimize the complexity of your offering as much as possible, both for the reviewer on the GSA side, as well as once you're on the schedule, to make it easy for the federal government to know what they're purchasing from you and just facilitate that process.
Curtis, do you have another question? Okay, just to cover one more question, Jennifer, can you add items to a GSA schedule after the GSA schedule has been awarded?
Yes, again, the day after you get the award, you can certainly make a modification to add products, services. You can change your address. You can, again, add special item numbers, add labor categories, add products, add software. The only thing you can't do where you have to wait 12 months is to increase your prices.
Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Jennifer. For the
Great.
audience members, we are still answering questions in the Q&A. So if we're not able to get to them today, we will be following up in the next few days by responding to your question. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate that. Okay, we've got, looks like 9 minutes left here and just, I think 2 or 3 slides left here. So again, the big takeaway today for any company is if you're scratching your head thinking I should get a GSA schedule, or should I not, you really need to do your homework and conduct kind of this capture process before you are going to decide to pursue. And there's factual data out there on SAM.gov, on FPDS, on USA spending to get those answers. And you will have specific dollar amounts that show for your specific industry code, for your specific special item number, what are the dollars? I would go back to even 2019, because if you go back to 2 or 3 years, you're going to be looking at COVID data, which is going to probably throw some things off. So look at what are the averages for the last 4 to 5 fiscal years, 5 fiscal years, to see really what's happening. How are the purchases? What do they look like going through GSA versus going full and open competition versus set aside or whatever? And that should dictate your strategy. So if you're fortunate enough to be in communication with a prospect at the government level, ask them what is their preferred method of purchase. If they don't say GSA, do not go through the headache of getting onto this, because there are some repercussions post-award, which we'll talk about next Thursday. And you shouldn't be getting onto the schedule simply just to meet this $25,000 sales requirement. If that's why you're getting on, then this is probably not the right tool for you. You should just stick with some of the basics and just respond to solicitations that you see on sam.gov, as long as you meet the requirements. And again, that pricing homework is really essential to do before you go down this path. You know, what are the other competitors that are selling widgets, or that are selling specific software, or that are selling A&E services or IT professional services? What are those average rates look like? And if your numbers are much higher, your GSA schedule rates, as they negotiate you down to these averages, keep in mind, are only going to be price ceiling. So you'll typically be bidding for work through your schedule at lower rates. Is that going to put you out of business? Perhaps. So make sure that the schedule is not a liability for you, that it's an asset. And, you know, maybe it's, you know, going back to basics and making a list of, you know, pros and cons. If you think in the long run that, you know, every 12 months, the price increase that you're going to get is then going to make you profitable, then great, you know, go for it. But build it and they will come is not a strategy. And you'll see that when you conduct the market research to find out how many companies within your SIN actually do not have any sales through their schedule. And as I mentioned, just use that data, all the websites that we've mentioned many times. I'm sure that Curtis and Wendy have put these links into the chat. Thank you guys for doing that. Again, USA Spending, FPDS, and SAM.gov is let that drive your strategy. That's real factual data, historical data. Look at acquisition forecasts to see what is going to be procured through GSA schedules as well. There's so much information out there, you just need to use it. And I think this is it. In fact, is my last slide. So I want to thank everybody. We've got, looks like 5 minutes left. I'm happy to stay longer if there's more questions. So I will, I'll pause here and see what's coming in.
Thank you, Jennifer. I know that Curtis is having a bit of audio issues or microphone issues, so therefore I will close out the session. Since we still do have 5 minutes, Jennifer, I want to thank you for hosting this session and the upcoming sessions that we will have. For everyone who do not know, this is the first part. We will have 3 parts that will be upcoming next week and the week after. We will address maybe about 3 or 4 more questions if we have time afterwards. I want to remind everyone before you leave that we do have a survey that will pop up once you leave the session. If you could please complete the survey. It does help with our tracking to identify with these small business development trainings that we offer to the small business community if they are effective. Starting with our first question, Jennifer, if there is not a code that describes the product we provide, does that mean that our product is not typically solicited through GSA schedules?
I would say that would be correct. I'd be curious to hear what that what the company is actually providing.
As a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business and economically disadvantaged women-owned small business, is there an advantage for customers buying from us?
Sure. So outside of GSA, well, if you go back to that pie chart that we had on one of the very early slides of how the government purchases, set-asides are certainly used. Small women-owned, veteran-owned, hub zone, all of those are small business set-asides that departments have goals, as well as prime contractors have goals for subcontracting to those set-asides. So There's certainly advantages, but don't think of yourself, this is kind of my tough love statement, don't think of yourself as too special because there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of companies that are small, women-owned, veteran-owned, hub-zone, and all the rest. The problem that the government has, the problem that the prime contractors have is finding somebody that has those designations, but also then has the past performance. So really that's what you want to focus on is the past performance and really delivering on the job and having something of value versus having that checkbox. That checkbox makes you attractive, but it's not going to win you the contract.
Thank you, Jennifer. The next question, are you saying we need to provide invoices of previous orders to reflect prices on our price list?
Yes, so if you're selling a glow-in-the-dark widget, you'll need an invoice for a glow-in-the-dark widget.
Also, my financials were impacted by the pandemic. If I was not profitable in one of the last 2 years, will that affect my ability to be awarded a schedule?
Yep. So if any of your financials are showing a loss, then typically you'll submit a narrative. I would do it upfront with your submission to explain why you had that deficit. And obviously it's going to be common because a lot of companies suffered during that period.
Can we add new product SKUs to the schedule after the initial price? Okay, you've already answered that one, answered verbally. Oh, there was a comment, Jennifer. They said, Jennifer Schaus always comes with the good news. Please have her back. I listen to her weekly on YouTube. It's a must for all of us on here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
So we are 1 minute until 1. The last question is, where can I find the TAA country list and what happens if the country is not on the list?
Yep, simple Google search. To get the TAA list, we may have that on our website under webinars, GSA schedule. There might be a link there. I can't remember if it's still there. If not, just Google for it or go over to the FAR, and it will show up there. So acquisition.gov to get the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulations. And I'm sorry, what was the second half of the question?
They asked, where can they find it? And if the country is not listed, what does that mean?
Sure. So countries like Russia, North Korea, China will not be listed. If they're not on that list, then you cannot provide those products to GSA.
All right, we are exactly at 1 o'clock. Thank you everyone for joining today. We look forward to seeing you next week. Again, thank you, Jennifer, for hosting today, and we will see you next week as well. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks to the VA OSDBU, and thanks to everybody who took the time. I appreciate it.